Hi, this is Remo here again. Today we're going to look at a topic that's affected each one of us. The topic is death. In the current situation, there's not one of us who has not had to deal with the grief of losing a friend, a family member, a relative, or even a child. Just the mention of death brings to us images of several people that we have loved and we have lost in this pandemic. And I'm not going to be focusing on how do we deal with this. I'm going to focus on what this COVID has brought to the forefront of people who claim to believe in Christ is the nakedness of our fear of death. And that's my focus for our conversation today. And I'm not speaking of someone who doesn't have the assurance of salvation, who doesn't know where he or she is going. I'm speaking of friends who are Christians, practicing, believing Christians. And more, I'm speaking to more of my friends. There are two common fears that come with them when they test positive for COVID. They feel they're going to die, and COVID positive result is almost treated as a death sentence. And the reasons are two, and one of them is a very hard reason for me, and the other is also a reason that is easily should have not been a reason at all. The first reason that should not have been a reason at all is people fear death because they have no idea what's on the other side. And sadly, that's a sad state to be in if you claim to be a believing, practicing Christian. Because Luke chapter 23, when the thief was hanging beside the cross, he asked the Lord to remember him that evening when he dies, with him in paradise. And God says, you will be in paradise with me. Or in John chapter 14, we see Jesus talking about the mansions that is in wait and stored for us in heaven when we get there. Honestly, this shouldn't have been a fear at all, simply because the assurance of salvation should have actually assured us as to where we are going. This stems from disbelief and not complete acceptance and understanding of who they are in Christ. And the second one, which is a little more logical, is the fear of what will happen to my spouse, what will happen to my children, what will happen to my parents when I die. How are they going to take care of themselves? To me, honestly, that's a genuine fear that anyone could be having. But again, that's a fear we shouldn't be having, simply because this fear stems out of two things. One, it stems out of our own understanding that we are the ones who are providing for, protecting, and taking care of our spouse and our children. Actually, it's not. I mean, we claim this verse in Psalms 50 where we says, you own the cattle on 1,000 hills. We usually use that as a prayer for financial sufficiency. But the reality is, if the Lord holds the cattle on 1,000 hills and everything in it, He also owns our spouse, He also owns our children, He also owns our parents. And for those of us who lived in a boarding school all our lives, we will know that we probably saw our parents once a year for about 45 days or probably 60 days in a year. That's all we saw our parents. Are we to say our parents took care of us then? They probably provided for us in paying our fees and other stuff. But our care came from the Lord through other uncles and aunties, teachers, friends, relatives. And some of us, like me, who lost a parent very young, will actually understand and be able to deal with this knowledge that we will never be able to find another father or a mother whom we lost. That physical absence will be there, that separation will be there. But we know for a fact that the Lord has taken care of us all through. The second reason why we fear for our spouse and our children, our parents, is because we do not, the church has not done what it should be doing. In James 1:27, it very clearly says, there is no other religion that is more pure and just than taking care of the orphans and the widows. The church should have been there protecting the orphan and a widow. If I knew if I was going to die today, and if my wife and children and my parents, my elderly mother would be taken care of by the church, I would have no fear dying. And because the church failed, we don't have a secondary worldly support system that we rely on. So my dear brothers and sisters, both these factors of fear of death that most of us often talk about is often stems from our disbelief of the faith and trust that we have in God. Uh, I will talk about two instances. One when they didn't believe in God and they faced death, and the other group of guys who believed in God when they faced death. In Mark chapter 4, we find the story of disciples at sea facing a squall of a storm. And Jesus was right there with them physically, and yet they were knocking in their knees and scared of death. And these were fishermen who had seen storms in life. And Jesus had to rebuke them about their faith. On the other hand, we see in Daniel chapter 3, the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're facing certain death. And then they stand up and say, the Lord whom we believe is capable of saving us from this death. Even if he doesn't, we will not worship you. And if we cannot come to that kind of a faith, if we cannot come to that kind of complete, implicit trust in God, that he would protect us in life and he will also protect us in death. Until that time comes, we will always live in fear of death, which means we will never be ready to go to heaven. Because the prerequisite to get to heaven is you and I have to die. And if we don't cross that bridge, you're never going to go to heaven. So if you really want to live life and enjoy it fully, be prepared to die. God bless us and help us get over the fear of death.